This is the Leadership Podcast, and we study leaders. This is episode 474, featuring Anne-Marie Anderson, broadcaster, keynote speaker, and author. Thank you for joining us today. This is Jim Bass-Lopez, founder of Rafting Advisors, and this is the Leadership Podcast.
Hey, everybody. Jan Rutherford, founder of Self-Reliant Leadership. Thanks for making us a part of your day as we study leaders. And as Jim said, episode 474, that means there are 473 episodes in our catalog. And chances are, based on your challenge, opportunity, problem, issue, we have probably talked about it with a guest on the show. So if you're ever in need of a resource or reference, just let us know, or just visit our website at theleadershippodcast.com.
Yeah, and look at our website too, because we have a link to our new YouTube channel that we've been using lately. Give us feedback on how things are looking and what we should be doing differently. But one thing we're very thankful for is our sponsor, Darley. They are just wonderful people at that company. Their mission supports all our military and first responders with the equipment they need to ensure mission success, whether that's water pump, a drone, emergency medical supplies, or whatever they need. Darley gets it for them. Learn more about this fantastic company and the people supporting our nation's heroes at darley.com. That's DARLEY.com. Darley, you serve others, we serve you.
Thanks, Jim. And our guest today is Anne-Marie Anderson. She's a 3-time Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, and you can see those Emmys right behind her, which are beautiful. Keynote speaker, author, her new book, Cultivating Audacity. And I'm looking at a Robin Roberts quote about the book. And Robin Roberts from Good Morning America said, "For more than 30 years, I've seen Anne-Marie embody the very essence of audacity. Cultivating audacity is Anne-Marie's blueprint for living a fearless, fulfilled life." And what we're hoping we'll learn today is how Anne-Marie breaks down barriers that stood between her and the life she wanted, and what that means for all of us as leaders. So, Anne-Marie, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much. I'm excited to join you guys.
Yeah, so what's not out there on the internet about Anne-Marie?
What's not out there is that I spent a life away from work. It's been 36 years in sports television. My time away from that, pre-kids for the most part, was adventure travel. And I've recently returned to it. So I did lots of crazy stuff before having kids, rafted the most dangerous rivers in the world, climbed Everest base camp, trek gorillas in the Congo, all kinds of things that I would absolutely not let my children do if they asked my permission.
So you said gorillas. You were in the Congo, not Rwanda or Uganda. You went to the DRC?
Right. So at that point, we started off in Uganda and then crossed over. I mean, again, just not the smartest thing, crossing over into Congo at that point with machetes. And I was like, sure, yeah, let's do it.
Well, we could talk about that for an hour, but I won't go down that rabbit hole. And Jim's like, good. So let's dig into this. Before we hit the record button, we were talking about audacity, and you write that audacity isn't a trait reserved for naturally fearless. How do you personally cultivate it, especially during career pivots?
I'm so glad you asked, because this is the whole point, right? Is that it requires practice, and it requires practice with failing and getting comfortable failing. So many people are afraid. A lot of times if you start off strong too, you're like, oh, I don't want to push my luck. I don't want to. The whole point is to go fail, survive it, learn from it, and try again. That's audacity, right? It's the willingness to take bold risks. Well, they're not so bold if you're succeeding all the time. So if you're not failing, you're really not pushing yourself to be audacious.
So it reminds me of some of the things I said in my TED Talk about, leaving your zone of comfort. The reason, couches are comfortable, TV is easy, lazy. I mean, you sit there and eat popcorn. I mean, all that stuff is kind of human nature, to be comfortable and not put ourselves in discomfort. How do we do that? How do we be bold when we're 45 years old or 50 years old? We have a lot to lose with our career or whatever. How do we be bold when, we have nothing to lose? We have a lot to lose.
Well, my first question is, what's the change that you want to make? And why do you want to make it? It's so important to understand why you want to make that change. Is it for, and it doesn't matter what the reason is it for more money? Is it for more freedom? Is it for more time with your kids? Because once you find out why you want to make a change, then you can start evaluating what you're willing to do, what you're willing to give up, what you're willing to risk in order to get there. I've made a lot of changes after 45. I'm 57 years old now, and I have, since 45, changed my career several times within television. And it's about what's the motivation for it? What do you hope to gain from it? It has to benefit you in order for it to work. And it seems like a small thing, but people will do things a lot of times for someone else, right? Like, my kids need more time with me. Well, if you're doing it just for your kids, then you're going to end up resenting your kids. If you're doing it because you want more time with your family, then you're willing to risk a little bit more, change things out, make some sacrifices other places. So I always talk about the intrinsic motivation. If you're doing it to put it on social media, if you're doing it to make somebody jealous, if you're doing it to prove somebody wrong, it's never going to work and it's not going to be satisfying.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious because you've got this experience you've had with a lot of top performers, with elite athletes, coaches, executives. What is it about them that allows them to confront their self-doubt, which they do have, and, to kind of push through that barrier that, kind of stops so many people to say like, "Oh, I don't know, it's a little bit too risky," or, I really like the way you posed it earlier, where it's like, I have a lot of success early, so I'm like, I don't want to screw that up.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Right. Well, for people that don't know my background, right, I've been working in television for 36 years, the first 10 of which I was a producer at ESPN, working my way up. So I was in the boardrooms and locker rooms of some of the most successful athletes in sport. And so, to answer your question, what I have found a lot is the conversations they had with each other, with themselves. So I talk about what stands in the way, right? It's usually 4 barriers, no matter who I've talked to. It's either one or all or some combination of fear, of time, money, or your inner critic. One of those things. You're afraid of failure, embarrassment, and such. Really elite performers on that last one, inner critic, have great control of their inner critic. They don't silence it. You can't silence your inner critic, but you can recognize it for what it is. Examine the messages with like a neutral curiosity. I think a lot of us get caught up in that inner critic saying, we're not good enough, we're not qualified, somebody else has more of this, I'm not ready. What I see with elite performing athletes is that they are quelling their inner critic, taking information and talking themselves through in a way. Here's the deal. Audacity at the base, right, is about optimism. And it's not optimism that things are going to work out the way you want it to. It's optimism that you're going to survive no matter how they work out. And that gives you that freedom to take those risks over and over again when you understand, if this doesn't work out the way I want it to, I'm going to get some information so I can try a different route.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious, when I was younger, my kids were young, I had the opportunity to coach. And I wasn't an experienced coach, but I had experience with the sport that the kids were playing. So we were trying to teach them lacrosse. And so I got paired up with a guy who had decades of youth coaching experience. And so in the beginning, I just didn't know what I didn't know. I knew the sport. He didn't know the sport. He knew how to coach kids. And we got to this point where he goes like, "Hey, Jim, this kid over here who's like, just great athlete, um, you know, and this other kid over here who's not the greatest athlete." He goes, "Don't pay attention to that. Like, coach them all up, because when they get to high school, you'd be surprised who the star athlete is. It's going to be the kid who doesn't give up, the kid who like keeps investing. The star athlete at, age 7, if they're so gifted, they don't put the work in, they don't test themselves, they never really get any better." And I was like, "Oh, that's good advice." And thankfully, I had to coach for a good long time. I got to see that, manifest itself with the kids. So you're around all these elite athletes. I'm going here. I got a question. You're around all these elite athletes. Then you have kids.
Yeah.
How did that change, or how did that impact and affect how you decided to kind of coach your kids through their challenges?
Oh, I love that question. Thank you for asking. I mean, right up on my son's room is a quote by Kevin Durant that says, hard work beats talent when talent fails to work hard.
Mhm.
And it's exactly what you're talking about. So being around these elite athletes for decades and decades, the first thing I do, and for anybody that is watching their kids' sports, shut up. Okay? Shut up. Like, don't talk about their officials. Don't try to coach your kids from the stands. They can't hear their coach. We have an agreement in our house that their father and I, after every game, no matter what happens, we always say the same thing. So it's absolutely consistent. After every game at any level, we say, "Are you hungry?" That's it. My son just played in the NCAA tournament. He's a collegiate volleyball player. The match did not go well in the NCAA tournament. Are you hungry? And he just laughed. He's heard it his entire life. So the first thing is let them be coached and have their own experience themselves. And then the second thing is I share my failures with my children intentionally. And it's really easy, I think, especially when we get to our ages in here where they see career success or they see money or they see all these other accolades or trophies, or such, where they think, oh man, he or she is just good at this. And so whenever I've got a failure, I share it. I go out of my way to share it. I'll show them, hey, I know I booked all these speaking gigs. Here's the 15 plus rejections I got in the last 3 days. And now they understand that. Like I'll say, hey, I just got rejected 6 times today. Been a rough day, kind of joking. And they'll be like, oh, yeah, sure, you're going to crumble. Because we just know it's just all information. That's
Yeah.
the biggest thing I think that I've been able to pass on to the kids from my experience.
I really appreciate that we're talking about fear. When I look at my own coaching experience over the last dozen years, the thing that shifted for me the most is I used to think all about motivators and drivers, and they're kind of the same for everybody.
Mhm.
But to really understand human behavior, I think you have to understand what people fear.
Yeah.
And, and again, this whole idea of being bold. And I'm wondering, and you're probably around these people as well, Anne-Marie, that you're looking at it, you're like, you need to be bold. You're not playing to win. And, what is it that they need to do differently to make the bold calls with clarity, with confidence, to be audacious? What is it that they need to do differently to confront the fear?
Well, so I think they need to think about what they're afraid of. And the easiest way to do this, in my experience, is to catastrophize your life. Okay.
Mhm.
So I'll put it to you this way. I was a producer, as I said, at ESPN, and then I decided I wanted to be in front of the camera. Completely terrifying idea. I did some backdoor kind of stuff, and I was going to end up on a regional network in the Mountain West doing college football sidelines. Great way to start. Before that ever happened, somebody got sick. I filled in for them. And so my very first time on live television was on ESPN2 in 78 million homes, the opening weekend of college football. I was doing Ohio State, Virginia Tech, I think it
Wow.
was terrified, sobbing outside the stadium, just what you want in your reporter, right? Sobbing outside the stadium moments before going on. I'm on the phone with my husband outside, and he tries to calm me down, right? And he says, well, we always want to say, Anne-Marie, what's the worst that can happen? Right? What's
Yeah.
the worst? And I was ready. I was like, oh, you want to know what the worst that I've been up thinking about the worst that could happen. Okay. The worst that could happen is that not only will I be so bad on air that I'll never get another job on air, but I'll be so bad that I'll never be able to produce again because the people I produce for will never take my advice again. And I could lose my entire career in television. And let me tell you something. If I lose my career in television, I will be miserable. And you will have no choice but to leave me because I won't be able to be a good mother to our children, who aren't even born yet, by the way. And I could die destitute and alone. And he was like, wow, went there. And I was like, yes, I did.
Wow.
When I'm coaching somebody now, I actually have them go through, catastrophize the entire situation, because the chances of me dying destitute and alone because I'm bad as a sideline reporter are pretty small. And so you just take it to this ridiculous level. And I think there's a little bit of a degree of freedom in that, knowing you're not going to win an Emmy your first time on air. You're also not going to die destitute and alone. It's going to be somewhere in the middle, right? And the biggest thing, and I keep saying it, you're going to get information as to how to take your next step. If you don't take that first step, how do you know where to go?
Do you also talk to them about, hey, here's what happens if you do nothing?
Oh, yeah. Well, you're coming to this podcast, you're coming to my book, you're coming for some kind of change. There's something, right, that you want to change. And so if the price is too high, I say this to my kids all the time, if the price is too high to do the work to create the change, then wait till you get the bill for regret, because that is super steep. I would far rather to have a list of failures, and I do, of course, we all do, than have a list of regrets.
Yeah.
What ifs?
Our past guest, Dan Pink, wrote a book about regrets that's still getting a lot of traction.
Yeah.
Emery, I'm just curious. I always say my stack of failures, is really high. My stack, if somebody looks at my business and says it's successful, the stack is like this. Is that your experience?
Sure. It's funny, the Emmy Awards, I didn't really have out until recently because of Zoom, right? They make a nice Zoom background, but they've been in my closet for decades because that's not how I measure my success. It just hasn't been that way. Like, I sit still. People have FOMO, right? The fear of missing out. I don't have that. I have FOSS, the fear of staying the same. And so in terms of failures and success, I just don't want to stay the same. I want to keep pushing and trying something different every time. And so I consider my failures to be success, if that makes sense. Because look, I tried here, that didn't work. I tried here, that didn't work. I tried here, that didn't work. But I tried here, ooh, that one worked. I wouldn't have been able to get to that fourth one if I hadn't had these 3 attempts that missed the mark earlier.
We also had an astronaut on by the name of Terry Virts, and he always says he wasn't the best candidate to become an astronaut, but the people that were better than him just didn't apply, and he's like, you gotta take the shot. Hey, before we get back to Jim, just a reminder that our sponsor is Darley, and they're based in America's Midwest, and the wonderful people there support first responders, law enforcement, and military around the globe. You can learn more about our sponsor at darley.com. That's DARLEY.com.
Yeah, thanks, Jan. Emery, you introduced the idea of a front row, okay? Which is, if I summarize, the people who elevate and support us. How do we misuse or maybe get into trouble with using our front row? Like, tell us a little bit more about why it's important and how sometimes we get into trouble with that.
Sure. I'll start with, we get into trouble because we think that our best friends should be in our front row, and that isn't necessarily true, right? I always say there's 2 people who probably shouldn't be in your front row: your mom and your best friend, because they want you to stay safe. They don't want you to get hurt. And your front row needs to be those people who will challenge you, who will push you, who will tell you the truth, right? Pick you up if you're down, but also give you a smack on the butt if you're not doing the work that you need to do. And I think I have several different front rows in my life, right? I've got a fitness front row. I've got a television front row. I've got a writing front row, my personal life front row. It can be different groups of people. The mistakes that people get is that they allow people into their front row, meaning you're taking their advice, when you're not really considering their motivation, their experiences. We see everything through our own prism. Everybody does. And so if somebody's telling you something's too risky, well, that is colored by their experiences. So what are their fears? Do they have a big fear of embarrassment or failure or, abandonment? That's important to know before you take somebody's advice.
Yeah. It's funny. You're going to remember this. I think, we probably have a similar vintage. Growing up, one of the things I was so excited about to see on TV, like always like the Wide World of Sports or something like that before ESPN, was like Evil Knievel, some daredevil was going to do something crazy.
Snake River.
Yeah, Snake River, whatever it was. And like back in the day, like they didn't do the math. They're just like, I think we could do this, so they just like, they like say like, yeah, they stick their finger up, check the wind, like, yeah, I think, yeah, we could do this. And like the crashes were horrendous. Like clearly their front row was not giving them good advice,
Well, okay, I'll challenge you on that. Were they or were they not? Because we're all sitting here talking about Evel Knievel decades and decades later. So what was his goal? I'll let you finish your sentence, but I was like, but maybe, if his goal, which I think it was to be incredibly well known and the biggest STEM man, here's the three of us later, he'd be tickled pink to be like, oh my God, they're still talking about me in 2020.
I mean, no kidding. I mean, you're right. It's define the goal.
Right.
But I look at that and I just say like, when we're choosing our front row, should we choose people who are going to like be able to do the math? Look, to be able to say like, it's like, hey, your advice might be sound, it might not be but your point is really well taken. I kind of stepped in that one. That's a good point.
But I mean, how about your front rows is several different people? So maybe you want somebody who's going to be able to do the math in there, somebody who's a big dreamer in there, somebody else who's got experience in your field in there. I mean, you get to select and you're not stuck with them. You can move people around, and for me personally, I use the terminology, and anybody who's come to one of my keynotes uses the terminology front row because there is a certain power and social connection in it. If I ask you, hey, I want to do this, I want to write a book, right? Will you be in my front row? So then the first thing that when you're starting Tuesday, great. What's going to happen? You're going to say, how's that book going? Because I've made it public. I wouldn't put on Facebook, hey, I'm going to write a book, and then have all kinds of people with different intentions. So it's about having your chosen few, making it public and seeing what happens from there.
Yeah, we've all been coaching for like a number of years now. So I think, we're well aware of how many people are out there like waiting for someone to choose them, to be mentored by them. And, I know that you figured it out and were smart enough to say like, no, I want this person to be in my front row. You went out and actively sought that. At what point in your career were you at that point where you recognized like, I need to create and the front row that's going to support me rather than just waiting for it to, happen on its own organically?
Oh, that's so interesting. I mean, I've had so many different iterations professionally because, as I said, I don't like to stay the same. So I don't know that there was a moment. I know that when I got divorced, and my ex-husband and I are very close friends, we both talked about needing front rows to help support us through it and picking those people carefully because other people would want to put their own divorce experiences on us. And, we still share a home and we co-parent our kids very well. And so somebody who's come through an acrimonious situation isn't necessarily the best person to have in our front row because their experiences are colored by that. So it's just a different way to think about it, no matter what your front row is. My fitness front row are a couple of Olympians, multi-time Olympians. And I tell them all the time, I need new friends. I can't keep up with you guys. Like I can't do it, but it's always a joke, but they are incredibly motivated to be fit. And so it helps me. So kind of looking at the mutual benefit between you and what you're giving back to the people in your front row and where they're coming from towards you.
Yeah. I want to shift gears a little bit, Anne-Marie. What I'm observing out there it literally is the hamster wheel.
Oh, no.
I mean, and what's interesting is so many leaders are on the hamster wheel and so many teams are completely not engaged. We know from the latest Gallup survey that maybe 21% of people or 31% of people in the United States are engaged at work. And so, you have these leaders that really are operating from a scarcity, that they're not good at delegating. They're running around, they're getting on planes like crazy. There's not enough time, resource, trust. How do you balance the whole scarcity that leaders feel versus the abundance that's needed to create real commitment?
It's a great question. When we talk about like front row. It's identifying those people who have goals. And as a leader, you need to have a really intimate understanding of what motivates each person. I call it a shape-shifting leader. Somebody who's able to shape-shift to each person. The best coach I ever saw as a shapeshifter was Phil Jackson, who was able to tailor his coaching style to the needs of that particular athlete. Did you guys happen to see The Last Dance during COVID, the ESPN series? All right. So for anybody that is listening and didn't, or watching and didn't see that, it's about the Bulls, the Chicago Bulls NBA team season in 1998, which was announced ahead of time was going to be Phil Jackson's final season as head coach of the Bulls. And they wanted to win a championship. And what Phil Jackson did really well, which is when I coach corporate leaders, what we talk about is identifying the one goal and leaving everything that doesn't interfere with that out of the equation. Because people are working remotely now and there's all these other ways to work, and it used to be we want to be balanced and now it's play to your strengths. He was excellent at figuring out the one goal and what didn't interfere. And so in The Last Dance, there's the story of Dennis Rodman saying, hey, I need a vacation in the middle of the season. At that time, I was a Los Angeles bureau producer. And so when Rodman was allowed to go to Vegas in the middle of the season, I was one of the people in Vegas who went to Vegas to try to chase him down and cover it. And I was like 26.
What a job.
And I was exhausted. And I wasn't drinking. I wasn't partying. I wasn't doing any of the stuff that he was doing. And the weekend nearly killed me. I don't know how he did it still. But what he was able to identify was Dennis Rodman doesn't need basketball. His identity is not all basketball. But we can't win a championship without Dennis Rodman, who was the best rebounder in the game. So whatever he needed to do to motivate and keep Dennis Rodman invested or engaged, to use your word, is what he was going to do. And I think that's the biggest challenge for leaders. You don't parent your kids the same. We know, right? You just don't. And so Michael Jordan, no, you can't go to Vegas in the middle of the season because you need basketball. Rodman, okay, come back, please.
Well, you said something that really triggered a thought, and that is that you've got to be singularly focused. You've got to figure out what the distractions are, what they aren't, and to focus. Well, that takes audacity.
Yeah.
You know, as you're saying, it takes focus and it takes boldness. And you've got to be willing to fail, because what if you picked the wrong thing? What if you said no and subtracted things that were really vitally important? I mean, so it's not only about audacity, but it's adaptability along the way, because you're not gonna get the exact right azimuth straight off.
Right. And I would argue that you can't pick the wrong thing. Whatever the thing is you picked is where you're going to learn something, and it will help you shift in a different direction. Once you get rid of the right or wrong, success or fail, where it's all information coming in to lead you to where you are, I think it's incredibly freeing. And with all of the noise, I think it's very important. One of the other obstacles I talk about is time, and it's this urgency fallacy, because everything's urgent, right? You talked about the hamster wheel. Everything's urgent. We've got to get this and this and this and this and this. And then how do we find time for the things that are important to us?
Yeah.
So it's about separating and recognizing that things that are urgent are usually in response to a request, right? Answer the email, respond to the text, turn in the project, whatever it is. It's actually urgent to somebody else, right? But it needs to be done. Things that are urgent by nature will get done because they have a deadline. Things that are important move us closer to our values, vision, goals, who we want to be. How often does that get put on the back burner until we take care of all our urgent tasks? And urgent never ends. So for me, a great leader is somebody who's going to be able to say, obviously, I have all of these incredibly urgent matters. I'm carving out specific times to work toward our goals, our future. It takes more time and more deliberation, doesn't have a deadline, but has consequences if neglected.
Yeah, good stuff. I'm really curious about this one, because of your journey. You know, you've connected your vulnerability with your transformation. But I think what's really interesting about you is you've had multiple transformations. And so I'd be really curious to understand like how your relationship with vulnerability has changed through the series of transformations you've had in your lifetime and your career.
The vulnerability, meaning accepting that I will, air quotes, fail at something publicly. Is that what
Yeah.
you mean by vulnerability?
You know, just the vulnerability of saying like, you know, hey, it could be a strength, not a liability. You know,
Yeah.
where it's like I have done this thing and I have exposed myself to all the worst fears of catastrophization.
Yeah.
You know, in because I mean, we coach people through transformations.
Mhm.
People might go through one or two. You've had many, and
Yes.
it's like this endless pursuit. And that makes me very curious about you and your relationship with how accepting you are to allow yourself to be vulnerable.
I am very gentle with myself. So it's kind of the opposite. Like people beat themselves up. I have cultivated over the years the thought process of it's all going to be okay. I mean, the way that it happened is a tragic story in that I had a colleague of mine at ESPN die on his 6th day at work. Nobody knew him. I interned for him. He came in, 37 years old, newly married, starting his dream job, fit. His name was Peter Rogot, who's the next Sports Center anchor. And before he ever went on air, he collapsed. I believe it was an aneurysm. And I did CPR on him unsuccessfully. And I remember thinking, if you can be 37 and newly married and starting your dream job and have it all ripped away in a second, then I'm not going to wait for anything ever again. And I think that affected me so deeply. I was 23 at the time, that's the moment where I started to live audaciously, because what's the worst that could happen didn't hold nearly as much weight with me anymore. And so every time I reinvent myself, if you will, like as an author, as a speaker, as a play-by-play announcer, from a producer, I understand also as a former collegiate athlete, you're not good your first time, and you shouldn't be. If you are, it's too easy. I mean, when we all learned to ride a bike, we fell and it hurt and we got up and we tried again and we fell again until eventually we didn't fall. And I just have carried that mentality throughout my life.
Yeah, that's good stuff. I appreciate that.
Well, this is, I mean, Jim and I love talking about audacity. We love talking about leaving your comfort zone, you know, being gritty, doing hard things. And it's always interesting because so many of the people we've had on the show, when you talk about, you know, what compels you to do these hard things, it's really hard to describe to other people. I don't know if you found that to be true, Anne-Marie.
Yes, I think so. I think it is, like, I call it fun with rejection. At one point in the book, and people are like, how can you have fun with rejection? But I started toying around and trying, because I was so thin-skinned and so sensitive. I started toying around with trying to get rejected as much as possible to desensitize myself. And there was one person who worked for Fox who was kind of a known bully, and I kind of knew that. And I mean, that every time I saw him for a year and a half, I would say, hey there, Anne-Marie Anderson, is today the day you're going to hire me? And he'd be like, no. And for a year and a half, I set myself up for rejection again and again and again for him until it became a game. It sounds ridiculous. Of course, he hired me after a year plus. And, you know, I ended up working for him because after a while he thought, well, she's not intimidated. She's going to keep trying. Let's just see how it goes. So it's hard to explain, but when you start actively seeking it out, it becomes easier. I tell people, fail first. Go fail a lot. Whatever the thing is you're most afraid of, do that one first.
Yeah.
Do the thing that scares you the most.
Well, you definitely chose a profession with a high amount of rejection,
Yeah.
and for all kinds of personal, I mean,
Yeah.
your style as much as substance things. I mean,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, oh my gosh. Well, what would be your closing thought for our leaders that are listening right now, based on what you've written about, based on your life experiences?
I think sharing your vulnerability with your people is really important. And no, I don't mean kumbaya and you sit around and you talk about it. I mean saying, hey, Jan, you're really skilled in this particular area and I struggle in that area. So help me understand what we need to do differently. And then there's this sense of autonomy, genuine autonomy for Jan, right? To be able to say, here's my expertise. I am valued. Here's what I can add. It creates a powerful group culture when you weave individuality into this kind of mega thought, mega experience. And so that would be my advice for leaders is think about being a shape-shifting leader and finding the best of everyone and not being afraid to say, this isn't my strength, so I'm going to follow your lead on this issue.
I love that. That's a great place for us to kind of wrap things up today. Anne-Marie, thank you for your sage wisdom and your presentation of audacity to us today. It's just fantastic dialogue.
Thank you. I had a great time talking with you both.
Yeah, thanks. And for our listeners, that's all we have for you this week. We'll include ways for you to connect with Anne-Marie in our show notes. So visit us at theleadershippodcast.com. And remember, inaction breeds doubt and fear. Action breeds confidence and courage. If you want to conquer fear, do not sit at home and think about it. Go out and get busy. Dale Carnegie. It's a wrap.
Thanks for listening to the Leadership Podcast. To listen to more shows or to access the books and content discussed on this show, be sure to visit theleadershippodcast.com. The material in this podcast is copyright by Rafting Advisors and Self-Reliant Leadership and must have written approval before commercial application.